Way back in 1952, Jack Young won the World Solo Championship, and since that time it has been a drought for Australian riders, although plenty have been successful in getting through to the final. But 21-year-old Wiltshire from Newcastle has a real chance of beating the world's best at Bradford's Oddsall Stadium in Yorkshire. Defending champion Hans Nilsson will start favourite, and other tough competitors will be Amando Castagni from Italy, Zoltan Adorjan of Hungary, Ronnie Corrie and Rick Miller from the USA, plus a strong England contingent. But Wiltshire has beaten most of his 15 opponents this year and is considered a real chance. At the Wickham Park courts, the Newcastle Badminton Club will host the Australian Championships this weekend. Along with the individual events, the team's battle is full of interest, with New South Wales trying to snare their first championship since 1961, ironically won in Newcastle. Two Novocastrians will line up in the state side, Andrew Merrilees and Michelle Jennings, and they will be hoping New South Wales can win the Eid Glentinning Shield. The opening ceremony is on Sunday afternoon, with play on each day until next Friday.
Even bigger.
The 62,000 properties in Lake Macquarie were surveyed by the Valuer General's Department. The values, which will be issued to landowners within 2 weeks, reflect the general surge in prices, most notably in Sydney. Properties with the largest jump in value were those on the lake foreshore or with ocean views. In Wyong, Gosford, Morisset and Caves Beach, prices mirrored the escalating Sydney market. The department believes this is due to the Sydney to Newcastle freeway extension, reducing travelling time between the two cities. In 1981, an average block of land in Lake Macquarie was valued at $21,000. Last year, it rocketed by 144% to $52,000. Also obvious from the department's findings, demand for hobby farms and small rural home sites has grown, with the price now averaging around $122,000, up 248% on 1981. Caves Beach and Eleebana remain the prime locations in Lake Macquarie, with blocks of land reaching $80,000. In Cardiff, land averages around $35,000, while at Charlestown a block could cost between $35,000 and $50,000. Lake Macquarie Council will use the figures to determine rates for each area. Although some may rise, others could fall. Whatever the case though, Council is limited to an increase of 7% on last year's rate takings. Jodie McKay for NBN News.
For 36-year-old Ron Kremen, there's nothing like a leisurely afternoon drive through the bush. Topping speeds of 200 kilometres per hour, Ron's in training for the Commonwealth Bank Rally southeast of Perth in 2 weeks, the Australian leg of the World Rally Championships.
It's the Wimbledon to the tennis players, it's the Grand Prix to the Formula One or the car drivers.
It's 4 days and 4,500 kilometres of bush tracks. Last year, former world champion Juha Kenkinen from Finland took the Aussie leg. He's back again with 67 of the world's top drivers for this year's event. Ron Kremen is driving his four-wheel drive, four-wheel steering Mitsubishi Galant. Barring extra suspension and roll bar, it's a factory-standard VR4. Rallying isn't a cheap business. With help from sponsors, Ron's crack against the world's best is costing around $30,000. But compared to the factory teams, that's play money.
The factory teams come out, Mitsubishi, Lancia for example, Toyota will come out with $1 million budget.
Last year, Ron finished 4th in his class. This year, he's putting his foot down and going for the top. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
The Tolley family had lived in Kuwait for more than a year, but husband Mark was out of the country on business when the Iraqis invaded. Left stranded, 29-year-old Gayla and their 3 small boys avoided capture by fleeing from one abandoned building to another, surviving hand to mouth.
She's got very, very strong maternal instincts, as any mother would. I'm quite sure she'd do whatever it was necessary to bring the children through unscathed.
Her family, waiting anxiously for news in South Australia, knew she and the children had made one unsuccessful attempt to get out of Kuwait a week ago.
It's getting so dangerous now that, I would shudder to think that if she tries to make another attempt.
Despite the increased danger, the second attempt worked. After a week in which they shifted 11 times, the Tolleys were reportedly helped by a Kuwaiti resistance force and local Arab families.
Things appear to have been a lot rougher on the inside than have been reported. And it seems like in the last week the Iraqis are actively seeking out Westerners.
Mrs. Tolley and the children are now in Baghdad with exit visas waiting to leave for the West. But with news of their situation difficult to obtain, the Department of Foreign Affairs is worried any new detail may jeopardise their chances.
The 2 Australians were among 22 Westerners arriving in Amman today. Our embassy officials here wouldn't release their names, but told how they'd been on holidays in Baghdad when the crisis began. Because they were Iraqi-born, they had no trouble gaining exit visas and will soon be making the trip back to Australia. But the future of freedom flights out of Baghdad is now caught up in more Iraqi red tape. Saddam banning rescue flights from his country until the ban on his aircraft landing in the West is lifted.
As soon as you think you've got something going, a regulation or a feature of the situation changes. It's just one more disappointment.
One problem was solved today. Foreign ambassadors in Baghdad deciding on a joint effort to get Westerners stranded in Kuwait into Iraq. They'll travel to Baghdad in a bus convoy. About 40 Australian women and children are expected to be with British citizens on board the first coaches into Iraq.
Those wishing to travel should have with them no more than 1 suitcase per person plus hand baggage. They should be prepared for a long journey and take water and food accordingly.
Many non-Europeans, not restricted by the Iraqis, have already made it out of Kuwait, but they're far from safe. They're part of an estimated 500,000 refugees stranded in makeshift desert cities. This is the neutral zone, the no man's land, between the Iraqi border post behind me and the Jordanian just in front. And it symbolises so much of the difficulties that the refugees who are still streaming across face. They get through that post back there and then get stuck here.
We need your help, please. We are all dying here.
The frustration's boiling over here. There are fights over what little food is available, and authorities struggle to maintain some sort of order.
The 29-year-old Sydney woman was travelling on the New England Highway between Scone and Aberdeen when her car was allegedly clipped as another vehicle attempted to overtake her. When she approached the driver of the Datsun, he allegedly went to the boot of his car and pulled out a shotgun. Police say 2 shots were fired, the second hitting the woman in the back of the head as she ran. A semi-trailer driver who witnessed the incident tried to ram the man's car as he fled the scene. The woman was taken to Scone Hospital but was released a short time later. Fearing the gunman would strike again, the TRG and SWAS joined local police in a search.
We've now ascertained that there are, apart from a shotgun being missing, 2 .303 rifles and some ammunition missing from a house that we know this person was at earlier in the evening.
Police scaled down the operation at dawn. Shortly after midday, detectives left Scone Police Station on an urgent call to Merriwa, about 60 kilometres to the west. It's understood police were in telephone contact with the gunman through a third person believed to be the man's father. Arrangements were made for the man to surrender to police at an undisclosed location. However, after waiting for more than an hour, anxious police received a telephone call from Merriwa Police Station. The man had apparently abandoned a previously agreed plan, choosing instead to drive to Merriwa, where he quietly gave himself up.
Yes, he came here under his own steam, knocked on the door and told the police that he was the fellow that they were looking for.
A police search of the vehicle uncovered personal effects including a quilt and a map, but no sign of any firearms. Police said the man was calm and quietly spoken during a brief interview when he spoke to detectives from Muswellbrook and Scone. However, his movements after last night's shooting incident are still sketchy. He was taken to Scone Police Station shortly after 3 o'clock for a further interview.
Their positions on the ladder are vastly different. Perth right on line for a finals berth, while the Falcons are in a different fight, one to avoid the wooden spoon. But in the past 2 outings, the young Falcons have found some form, just the tonic to boost an ailing basketball team.
To get a win under your belt after so long certainly improves the morale within the team, and to beat a team that was looking to make the playoffs and certainly needed the win against us, it was good to put that team out.
With an excellent win over the Adelaide 36ers under their belts, the Falcons now have the confidence to be real nuisance value to teams vying for playoff spots.
We've got a very tough run home, as you know. We've got Perth, Illawarra and Brisbane away, and we're hoping we can pick up at least 2 of those games and knock a few more teams out of the finals.
The season has been interrupted by World Championships, All-Star Games and buys, but that's been a blessing for the Falcons.
Last week's results, the top 5 teams all lost, whereas there were a lot of upsets and we were one of the upsets, so it seems to have helped our cause, and we haven't lost for 5 weeks now.
Tuesday's $100,000 NBN Cameron handicap has attracted what many a keen judge has labelled the most outstanding field in the history of the race.
I think we have here in Newcastle for this particular 1990 NBN Cameron the best field that we have ever had, ever been able to amass, and possibly the best field that we could reasonably hope to get. I think it's a tribute to the standard of the race that we have a field of such excellence at this present moment, and we have every confidence that next Tuesday will be possibly one of the best Cameron handicaps we've ever staged.
Randwick train Liverstoner Lane has been installed as the 13-4 early favourite for the NBN Cameron, with the Tommy Smith train Party Mood on the second line of betting and Prince Tri Alia, Spot the Rock and Cheval Cavalier at 8s. Last year's impressive winner Don't Play is at 9-1, but if he can reproduce this form, he'll be hard to beat. On Wednesday, the $250,000 Winfield Newcastle Gold Cup will be run, and it also has managed to secure a healthy field.
Lord Highbrow is a favourite. Ran a very good race in everything he contested last year. Back in 1988, I don't think I've ever seen a more impressive winner of a 3,200 metre race than that race he ran in the 1988 Brisbane Cup.
In a wide-open market, Yarra Bay is quoted at 4-1, prompted by the fact that Jim Cassidy has the mount. Macquarie Prince is at 9-2, while local hopes Lord Highbrow and the Ken Delfor stayer Regal Sheila are on the third line of betting and must stand a great chance of taking out the race. NBN will bring you the Cameron Handicap and the Winfield Newcastle Gold Cup live on Tuesday and Wednesday, just after 3.
The notion of a publicly owned authority paying a dividend to the government fits comfortably into Premier Greiner's vision of New South Wales Incorporated. The state considers itself the majority shareholder and looks for a return on its investment. While the state legally owns the Water Board, over the years it's contributed less than 10% of the asset value. The remainder has been largely financed by water users and ratepayers. Last year, the Water Board paid the state a dividend of $2.6 million. This year, Treasury wants $10 million, claiming the Water Board now has the ability to pay because it's become more efficient. State member for Newcastle, George Keegan, has been in high-level negotiations this week, fearing political fallout if Greiner is seen as taking the benefits from local sacrifices.
There's been no final decision made. It's only a recommendation being made by Treasury.
Does it bother you that they're even thinking along those lines?
Yes, of course it bothers me, and I've made a personal representation of the Premier yesterday afternoon before Parliament finished, and through the Minister who's responsible for the Water Board, Tim Moore, and he is of the same opinion as I, that it's a bad move by Treasury.
The Water Board owes the state government about $25 million. At issue is whether that $10 million payment will be used to retire some of that debt or simply be skimmed off the top and end up in government coffers. And if that's the case, this could be seen as an efficiency tax on the hunter. The hunter has long been burdened by high water rates and massive inefficiency. Now that a new Board of Management seems to be getting it right, the state appears to want to penalise the authority. Water Board management refused to comment today, but admitted that negotiations were at a sensitive stage. But you can be sure that if the Water Board cannot afford this impost, it'll be water users who again foot the bill. Is it that serious?
Yes, it is. It's that serious because I believe that the matter is a penalty if it goes ahead. And at this stage, this I must emphasise, there's been no firm decision made. I can quite categorically say that.
A capacity crowd was on hand to watch the final between New South Wales and Victoria, who had gone through the minor rounds undefeated. And what a final it turned out to be. The singles were close affairs, with the home state's Dominic Ziow getting the better of Peter Roberts in 3 sets, while Peter Blackburn from Victoria was too strong for Newcastle's Andrew Merrilees. Kim Nee had match points while leading Donna Powell of Victoria 10-4 in the second set, but a spirited fight back by Powell saw the Vicks grab another rubber. In another singles, Anna Lauer of New South Wales beat Rhonda Cater in straight sets, and at the end of the singles it was 4 rubbers all. At the completion of the doubles, Victoria 1 led 7-5, but New South Wales hit back to level at 7-all after the first 2 mixed doubles matches. Urged on by the huge crowd, New South Wales couldn't hold the Vicks out, and for the 4th championships in succession, Victoria were crowned the champs by the narrow margin of 9 rubbers to 7. The individual titles begin on Monday at the Wickham Stadium.
Ambulances took the worst affected women to hospital. One was knocked over by the sudden bolt, another hit in the head, a third needed oxygen. The others took refuge in the clubhouse to talk about their ordeal. The storm struck without warning at 11:30 this morning, while 60 players were competing in the Ladies Golf Foursomes Championship. Lightning hit a power pole, causing a flash and plunging the club into momentary darkness. Meanwhile, the bolt, possibly conducted by pockets of water, went on to shock golfers on 4 separate points of the course. Most were holding umbrellas containing metal parts. Anne Sargent was on the 6th tee, where in 1964 a woman was killed instantly by lightning.
All of a sudden I saw this great big lot of sparks coming from under the umbrella, and then sort of the whole hand started to tingle, and I just looked back and you could see it was sort of flashing right past and it went back behind.
Other golfers affected were up to 2 kilometres away on the 16th tee, the first hole and 13th green.
Well, usually we come in once we know the lightning's about, but this time there was just, all of a sudden a bit of thunder came, and then a lot of flashing of lightning just came all over the course, one after another. It was unusual, and that heavy rain just teemed down. Oh, I've never seen it like that before, and not that amount of lightning.
The golfers taken to hospital were treated for shock and later released. Rebecca Skinner, NBN News.
This was the first union meeting since the findings of an independent inquiry into the asbestos cover-up were released on Tuesday. The report named 2 men who still work at the hospital for failing to act on the Flint recommendations that signs be erected in affected areas and safety equipment be issued to staff. The workers were told that 2 men would not be sacked and would remain in their positions, one as the hospital's safety officer.
Well, that's in the hands of the management, and as you can see by our meeting, there was a few people very upset about the actions of these 2 gentlemen.
There is strong feeling within the Health and Research Employees Association that they are getting nowhere with management over the issue. Although some safety signs have been erected around the hospital, staff claim there are still affected areas left unposted.
There's still signs that haven't been erected. Asbestos is still not sealed in certain areas.
A former boiler house employee was last week diagnosed as having first-stage asbestosis, while yesterday a telecom employee working in the ceiling near the kitchen was covered with the hazardous dust.
When he got up there, he found that all the asbestos lag pipes, all the asbestos was lagging off the pipes and flaking off, and apparently he got covered in asbestos.
So there obviously wasn't signs up in that area?
In that area, no, there was no signs up still.
Management, though, claims the man was not put at risk.
If there'd been a breach in the integrity of the ceiling, certainly there perhaps should have been a sign there, but there was no breach in the integrity of the ceiling until such time as this chap had inadvertently come to work on the ceiling.
Although strike action was suggested, it was decided to continue bans on stationery and supply to the executive suites until legal advice is sought. Jodie McKay for NBN News.